the angle makes such a difference. Now here's a trick. So you got your phone and you're filming your let's say it's a power side kick. You're filming your power side kick because you want to review it. Watch the video upside down. Don't watch the video up the right way, because what you'll see is
so everybody, we have the pleasure today of speaking with Mr. Brendan Doogan, who's a colleague of mine in the ITF Coaches Committee, former competitor and team coach for Team New Zealand, with a number of accolades across a number of disciplines. And maybe, Brendan, if you could kick off, and for the people who don't know as much about you as we do, give them a little introduction to yourself, your background, and maybe what interests you in Taekwondo.
Sure. Thanks very much, gentlemen. First off, for having me on your show. It's something I've watched with interest from afar. So it's a real pleasure to join in as a participant. So thanks very much. First off, so I'm a fifth degree from Auckland in New Zealand, and my instructor is Mr. Kane Rokura. His instructor was Sam Clark. His was Te Māori Kawa, and we think that he learned in Singapore with people like Nam Te and very interesting people like that. So that's the lineage there. I've always trained with my instructor, and only this year have I opened a club because I've very much supported him and what he's doing. On the competitive side, I turned 30 a decade ago, and I thought that's a bit old. So I know better. I thought I should try some stuff, and quite fortunately, at around the same time, we were hosting the World Champs here in New Zealand, in our capital city, Wellington. So I gave it a go, and I had the great pleasure of being in team power with some big names in New Zealand power breaking. Luke Thompson, 3 times world champ, and got a taste of it. Did all right, and went again as the individual 2 years later in Benidorm in Spain, and was lucky enough to come away with the win there, and then carried on, as you say, dipping in and out of competing and coaching and umpiring and all sorts, because I really enjoy this art that we do, and there's lots and lots of stuff in it that we can all benefit from, and hopefully I'll encourage some people on the power breaking end today.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And I mean, I'll make no bones about it. One of the reasons that we were keen to talk to you today was because if we take Ireland as an example, and there are many countries that are like this, if we took a snapshot in time back 2002, 2003, the disciplines that we'd have been known for in Ireland would have been, if anything, power breaking, team patterns, and to maybe a lesser degree, the individual disciplines of patterns and power breaking. When I say known for, not so much by the rest of the world, but, that those would be the disciplines that we would have been expected to be successful at in Ireland. And the focus is, of course, completely shifted. And we'd be very, very lucky these days if we could find, a group of 3 girls and not a chance at a group of 5 guys who can line up and hit some boards. So what I'd really like to start the conversation off with is, what does the training and preparation for power breaking look like as far as you're concerned? Not necessarily for a top level competition, but just to be competent, both for grading standards and, to be able to have a go at a national level of competition safely.
Fantastic, yeah. It's I actually feel the same about my own country. It's funny, we're known for the breaking, but even here, sometimes people need a bit of encouragement. So I do understand the viewpoint. For the average person, it's probably a little different to the competitive person. But in either case, if you want to enter a tournament, the best bang for your buck is special technique, which I haven't mentioned yet, but it's definitely a favorite of mine, jumping in things. You don't need any equipment at all. You don't even need a coach. If you like, you can use a smartphone to see how you're going, and that's it. So I, in my travels domestically and internationally, I've definitely recommended to people jump and break, because they're the easiest ones to get into. If you're wanting to succeed in sparring, as preaching to the choir, you need a lot of playmates. You need people to work with, because you don't want to get train tracked with your focuses and things. For patterns, well, you need to know a lot of things about a lot of different movements, and that's a big ask, and you got to have somebody who can guide you there. But with a power, you just have to hit a pad. The same year I was champ, I met a champ in the North Korean group. Lovely guy, Andrei Pavlov. Hi, if he's watching, he's joined our group now. Yeah.
Good stuff.
He didn't have any boards at his club, but he went on to be the world champ. He had no boards, no machine, nothing. He just hit the pad really hard.
Whoa.
Probably didn't know it hurt. So he went out and won it. So let me enter in that way. You don't need a lot of gear. You can just hit a pad really, really hard. And if you tie that with something like this, which I picked up from a lovely African gentleman, I forget his country. Apologies to whoever you are, sir. I picked that up. I think that was in Jezero. I think I bought this from a guy who was fundraising. It's a little bit of soft rope around a piece of wood, and I've got my own one as well. That's it. That's all you need. If your hands and feet are hard in the right places, and you can hit a bag hard, you will be able to break a board. The great secret, and I think it was possibly Mandela who said it. I forget. The big secret is actually that we're powerful. We actually can already do some of this stuff. We can actually jump really well. It's just the landing that scares most of us, and not having to get your feet back under you so you don't land on the top of your skull. We can actually do it. That's the big secret. So I'd really recommend to people, and I'll share a few tips on how to do it safely in a bit. Give it a go. You actually already can do it. It'll hurt a wee bit. But you're a martial artist. You get punched by your friends anyway. So toughen the hands and the feet in the right way. Hit the thing in the right direction, and you're probably going to be able to break something already. That's my first sort of approach for people who are a bit worried about it.
Yeah, so that actually gives me a really good jumping off point to maybe prompt the next step in the conversation, which is it's probably the two, special technique and power breaking, are in my club the most popular activities for children. So if we arrive at the class and they can pick anything to do, they are going to jump or they're going to break stuff. And, this somehow mysteriously vanishes around age 13. And so there's there's something that changes. And at age 13, 14, it's like, no, I want to put on the pads and I want to hit my friends, or I want to go on and do something else entirely. But there is something up until that point, and the fear isn't there. They will jump and they'll have a go. They will break and they'll have a go. And obviously we have progressively harder boards, and they can start with things that they can definitely break, and we can pad the board and they can definitely break it and remove some of the fear. What is it that you think causes that, I suppose, that very rational response of this thing might hurt me back, I should maybe try not hitting it?
Yeah, you're spot on. It's a very sensible thing, like to avoid pain and fear. However, like the general said, pain's the best instructor. It's just that nobody wants to go to that class. You learn so much. Like I know everyone wants to do the best that they can at whatever it is that they're doing. Academically, or if you're a singer, or if you're doing a taekwondo thing, it really teaches you. You can learn a lot from hitting a board that will be very much less noisy in the feedback, so to speak, than patterns or than step sparring and free sparring and things like that, self-defense, because the board's standing still and you can control a lot of the different elements, so you can learn really, really well. I guess it's the teenage thing that a lot of us went through. Your life changes and you want to explore other things. You want to go off and play other sports, or you talk to boys and girls, and you start, you get into your video games or whatever. Do stick at it, because if you stick at it, just ticking away bit by bit, you don't have to spend a lot of time, but stick at it. Just stick at it bit by bit, and it'll add up to a point where when you click over to being a senior, you may have more experience than the seniors. So do stick at it. It possibly also comes back to the coach, to the instructor, to find ways that are interesting and exciting. I had an amazing session in power breaking with Grandmaster Pierre Leclerc from Canada, and I think the last IRC this year, which might be all for this year, 2 months ago, number 148 in Auckland. He did a session on the topic was self-defense and breaking, but the real topic was how to teach, which is excellent. That really that was really great. So what the thing was we had to use the palm heel, as we call it in the old-fashioned way, the open fist and some elbows and maybe a side fist, yop jamuk and stuff, and break really, really easy boards. I was tangentially involved in finding these boards, and I thought, why are we getting these? These are all adults and black belts, but there's a little wee fingerboard, very, very easy to break. But the logic became clear quite quickly. Everybody succeeded repeatedly. They broke with a side fist. It was great. Hold it like this. What can you do? Hold it like this. Tilt it back. Hold it down low. So everyone succeeded at that, which is one of my key points, which I hope to reiterate a wee bit later. Then what is it like if you've got a couple of opponents around you? They're still standing still. It's a very static exercise, but you hit the boards in different angles. Okay, there's a bad guy. Here, his friend is there, and I've got to do that. Then they walk towards you slowly, holding the boards at different angles, which is vastly more fluid as an exercise. It went from very static to being very open, and I really enjoyed it because it really gave kind of a three-way perspective on some really interesting logics in Taekwondo. You got your power breaking logics, you got your self-defense logics, and then you've got all that technical nitty-gritty which says it should be 15 degrees and you should stand over here and your weight should be on the back leg and stuff. And they actually, in that particular exercise, they actually mesh exactly. They actually mesh perfectly. So if your distance if your distance and angle is wrong, so I think that's Taekwondo training secret number 3. If your distance and angle is wrong, you can't hit the bad guy as well, and the board makes that clear to you, just as it does in free sparring with a padded up partner and stuff. So I think if we're innovative and we find clever ways to keep people interested, if we give people challenges, as you mentioned, a lot of teenagers enjoy a bit of a challenge. They want to beat up their friends and things, see who's better, who can do what. Better than the other guy or the other girl. That's a nice way to do it. Give people a challenge. Something I did with the 2015 junior men's team is I mocked them in a constructive way. I know it's part of your culture and it's absolutely part of our culture here to tease each other. You like each other. If you're extremely polite, the guy doesn't like you.
Yeah.
So I teased boys. I said we had one from Waikanae, which is out on the west coast. We had one from Gisborne. We had one from Kitty way up north, and Palmy and so on. So anytime someone did a good break, I'd say to the other one, "Hey, Waikanae, are you all right with that? Like he just beat your best score, man. You good with that?" No, okay, but in a sustainable way, in a socially nice way, so that they all fed off each other. They were actually happy for each other to break, and so it built a camaraderie around trying to be better than each other, but also celebrating each other's successes. So
yeah,
that's a very long-winded reply. I hope I haven't gone too far.
We'll definitely steal some of the key concepts out of that. In a lot of what we're trying to do to get people to do patterns better or to spar better is to disguise the repetition, so it doesn't feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And maybe it's just something that not enough imagination has been applied to the disciplines of power breaking and special technique to disguise the repetition. To allow it to feel like you're doing something different every day, but still progressing towards a goal.
That makes a lot of sense. One of my coaches, Master Rocky Roundthwaite, and his wife Trish, they had a guy who's also one of my jumping coaches and breaking coaches, John Sorden. He's insane. He can do a twin foot front kick about here, and he's I won't say how many years older than me, but he can do crazy stuff like that. And one of his main tenets in the early days when he was breaking was the numbers game, and from the sounds of it, it wasn't so exciting, but it really produced a result. He went across to Australia where the master was living at the time, and he had to break one board 100 times with the side kick, and then 2 100 times, and 3 100 times, and then 4 100 times, which sounds crazy to me. That I listened very carefully to this approach and then modified it slightly for my own practice, if you understand me. But the logic is there, the repetitions. it's pretty well known in sports science. The more times you do something, the better at it. The more automatic you become, and the less likely it is that you'll get the yips and forget your own name when you're in front of the other guy or whatnot. And disguising stuff it's good. Disguise, trick them into learning or yourself.
And when you look at that, do you think that that kind of the numbers thing is something that's what attracts people to power breaking, in particular, the whole idea of being able to actually see increments of your improvement and progression? And then, like, on the back of that, do you think when people get to a decent high level and development and improvements are that little bit slower coming and things like that, do you think that people maybe then slack off and try something else, or how have you found that?
Well, I don't think I need to add much at all. I think you're spot on with your analysis there. That's it. It's easy to make progress in the beginning because you're starting from zero. It's like myself with the haircut. At the moment it looks like there's nothing there, and in 3 days it'll be amazing because there'll be something. It's still small, but it's something. But once you got the long hair, a difference of 5 centimeters, I guess if it's really long, nobody will know. You're absolutely right. So getting started, it's easy, and the big things you can help somebody to fix, or the things that you can spot for yourself, are easy. They're a little more obvious, but the increments, the margins get finer and finer as you get towards the top end, to where you have to be quite good at hunting stuff out to find those extra margins. You won't make great leaps, and I think that's the same in all sports. You have to play within the rules, so you can't do anything that's too far out of the style of a Yopchagi or whatever. So the things that you can do become finer and finer, to where possibly I think the major point is mental. You've got some very, very good girls and guys on either side of you who can also do what you can do, but it comes down to who can do it at that exact moment when you're on the mat and control the psychological aspect, which I know is one of the things you're interested in talking to. But the progression, that's a really big deal. When I've met my ceiling, I've tried to fall back to a lower thing and finish on a win. So if I've been jumping all right, then I'll go as high as I can. I got a couple of sayings you can you can borrow if you like. They're a bit corny, but if it stops working, stop working. You got to protect your psyche. You got to protect your ego. You got to feel good about what you're doing. But if you're on a roll, keep rolling. So very cheesy there. Very hopefully memorable for our.
But it makes sense to freshen things up. Absolutely, like when things get, because then the joy and the reason you do it for in the first place obviously is not the same. So you got to take that step back, and I think that's where a lot of people actually struggle with, not just power breaking, even outside Taekwondo, with all sports at that high level.
Absolutely, the joy is that's one of the Olympic values, isn't it? Joy in human movement. We want to enjoy what we're doing. It's otherwise it's just a job, and why would you do that? Because you're not getting paid for that. So you could be doing something else. So changing it up is absolutely a great idea. So with the jumping, you can or the breaking, you can add constraints or change things in a certain way, or do them out of order, or do things that are similar but not actually what you're going to be tested on. So like the long jump sidekick was breaking a few legs, so they changed it to the high jump version. But that doesn't mean we can't still use it as a training tool to understand how we move and just play and grow through play. And on the say if it's boards, and you have to do a 3-board sidekick, they don't always have to be brand spanking new white ones. You can get some really old ones from club that are, on the face of it, when they were new, much harder, but now they're a bit granddaddy. They're worn out a bit, but they look hard because they're still black in color. So you could put a black one in the middle there, and then have a sandwich, like a reverse Eskimo sandwich. The ice cream sandwich.
Yeah.
Or you just switch the colors, or you change legs, or you do it completely without warming up, or you do it at the end of a really long sparring session, or you try it dodging, with one board or something, just so you get the reps, but keep it interesting, and you keep succeeding. So My golden rule is 3. And I break it all the time. If I fail 3 times at the jump or the break, I should stop. I should stop, because my mind is, as much as I wanted it to be really strong and hard, it's still fragile. So I have to protect the brain and the ego and the psychological side, and I fall back to something else. I switch breaks, finish on a nice one board elbow, and completely pulverize it, and think,
But
I'm good at it.
I think that's clever, because you don't want to compound failure with failure. So like you've got that whole thing of your body and your mind both remember, they remember novelty, they remember recency, and they remember primacy. So it's like the first thing you did, the last thing you did, and the best or the most memorable thing that you did. So, I mean, if you're walking away from a session remembering that you failed your last 6 attempts at something, that stays with you until you banish it with the next session or whatever. And whereas if you can, like we used to do this in particular with the team pattern, you'd always finish with a good one, where you felt like your rhythm was really good. So over time and a number of like practice sessions, you kind of feel like, yeah, this pattern is our easy one. This is the one we always do well. And so we kind of save that one for the end. So you finish with one that is a one and done. We're happy. Yeah. Okay. We can walk away from this session. And I think that's something that with special technique and power breaking is probably just as important, that you finish not necessarily with the techniques out of order or out of sequence, but that you finish with something that felt good.
Absolutely. And it doesn't even have to be a competition break. You can, you can go. It doesn't even have to be I know there was a point you made there. What was it that I wanted to come back to? It just jumped out of my head. Never mind.
We're only just talking about what was memorable in terms of like what was first, what was most novel, and what was most recent, and then finishing on a high. I suppose that was the main.
Right. Gotcha. Actually, I want to come back to Mr. Sorden's experience. So in the early days, he did hundreds and thousands of breaks over a very short period of time. I've learned that that'll injure me psychologically and physically. And I asked him a few years ago, how does he train when he's doing the jumping? Because he's really good at it. Most of the work is done in the gym. He's a very, very strong man. So I do recommend that people go to the gym and work out. I was a little surprised I won't name names, but I went to a country not too long ago, within the last 5 years, and I asked them, and these guys were all sort of national representatives that were in the room, and not one of them went to the gym, and I was really surprised. So I came back and talked to the New Zealand team, like, hey guys, can you believe these guys don't go to the gym? But I read the room and I was like, hang on. How many of you go to the gym? And there's 5 out of a squad of 50. So do go to the gym. It's easy. It's easy games. You'll be stronger. Who doesn't want to be stronger? You'll be quicker. But what Mr. Sorden does now is he only jumps 6 or 8 times at the very peak, when he's really pushing up to get at the competition height, or to go further and push himself. It's only 6 or 8. And I said, gosh, why is that? And he said, well, because you just get tired. You just wear out. And then you get frustrated towards the end of the session, because you're in the sparring context, like I started the session, I was nice and loose and I was warm, and that front leg side kick, there was like I could do a million of them and I can't even feel it, and it just happens. And then at the end of the session, I'm like, man, my front leg side kick sucks. Well, you're tired. You've just trained for 2-3 hours and you've done 1,000 of them already. So I've actually changed my approach a wee bit to come back around to bang for buck. I really want to be encouraging people to come back to your points. To joy. You should enjoy it. And if stuff stops working, then you make the decision between pushing through and getting gritty and building up that mental toughness, or on the other side deciding that, okay, so I'm not benefiting from this. If I keep pushing, I'm just going to feel bad about what I'm doing, when actually I'm really good. I'm just a tired expert, or I'm a tired amazing person. I should take a break. Yeah.
It's like trying to be a sprinter, I guess, isn't it? Like it's one big burst, and it's the same with power breaking and special technique. It's not really like a volume event as such. You know what I mean? So it makes sense to kind of train that way then as well.
And I think that causes some confusion in our sport, doesn't it? Because you have people turn up to the one class, but you're effectively having your shot putter, your 100-meter sprinter, your 50K walk guy, and your insert 400-meter hurdles technical event here, and one is speed endurance, one is pure speed power, one is and it's like, yeah, we're going to train you all the same, and that we're going
I know that.
Yeah, it's just that logic that we're going to train you all the same, and you're going to get powerful, you're going to get fast, you're going to maintain your speed over this duration, and you're going to become technically proficient, and it's magic, And we've learned over the years, certainly, that magic isn't reliable. So maybe we should try something else.
It is tricky. Like when you got so when I first started kicking around with the team, that was the approach. Everyone was extremely fit, mentally really tough. We would do, I remember one coach in particular, Master Fellow, he'd get us to Chanji and we'd do 5 push-ups, and then Dan Kun, and 10 push-ups, and Dosan, and 15 push-ups, and we go up to Chungmu. And if we were lucky, he didn't make us go back down. The mental toughness you get from that, phenomenal. But that's a sort of a repeated strength stamina kind of a situation. It didn't serve everyone in the same way in the different directions, because you got prearranged, which is over in it's got to be under 75 seconds there. So you don't need that stamina, nor do you need stamina for the jumping and the braking, as you're saying. Yeah. And the demands are quite different for the different events. And when I was coaching the team between 2014 and 2017, when we came to Ireland, which was a great show, by the way. Go to Ireland, guys. It's an amazing place, and they'll look after you. It's really hard. You've got 5 disciplines, and within the disciplines, you've got juniors and seniors. You've got males and females. In the sparring, you've got different weight categories, and even within the sparring, you got different styles. People need to do things in a different way, so it suits their temperament, so they're not too easily read by the opponent. This guy's polished, he's going to do this, one kind of thing. It's really hard. So when I was going to New Zealand team camps, both as a competitor and as a coach, I started noticing this more and more, and I still haven't quite got the answer, because if you got, let's say you got a power breaker and they can meet the requirements, what do? For 2 days at a training camp, you got sparring people who are working hard the whole weekend because they need the exposure with their friends, with their mates from other parts of the country and whatnot. You got the patterns people who are probably soaking up the technical bits and so on. You got the jumpers, but you're not going to be jumping the same after 16 hours of training on a Sunday afternoon as you were at the start of the camp, and you probably shouldn't, because you could get injured, or you'd injure your ego. So I take my hat off to people who've figured it out, because I haven't quite done that myself, in terms of, as you say, how do you get everyone what they want when their needs are really quite diverse? As you say, it is like athletics. You've got people throwing stuff and running and jumping, and those are all very different. And how do you craft a team who are all focused on the same journey, while giving each person what they need in terms of physical requirements, technical input? It's a great challenge. It's enjoyable but tough.
And even at that high level, do you think that where do you think the balance lies between, we said, the technical aspect of power breaking and special technique, and we said the physical side of it? You mentioned earlier, like, about how important it is to be in the gym, and we see obviously the power breaking, it's usually the guys who carry a lot of mass with them and things like that. So yeah, how do you think the balance lies there?
It's a good one. Yeah, I think you know how they say abs are made in the kitchen. I think it's a little like that. It's on first glance you think you got to be at training. You have to be training under your coach and wearing your dobok and sweating out on the floor. But I think a large part of it is being physically fit, and there's a lot to be said for slow thinking as well, just mulling things over weeks and months and years, and letting your reptile brain come to deal with things, because the full brain doesn't always pick up on what's good for it. It's hard. It's a big deal. if you so let's say you've got a 3-hour training like we've had in Auckland in the past, you get everyone to do a warm-up together and a bit of team building and stuff, and you experience the joy in each other's company and just basic movements and stuff, and maybe you make everyone do patterns at the start as a bit of a warm-up, because we're all martial artists and we're probably going to be grading again anyway, so it'll come up and it's nice to get instruction and yada yada. And then you send people off over here to do some jumps. But if they're jumping at the start, then their legs won't be so good if they're doing team sparring as well at the end of the session. My current thinking on it is smaller chunks, smaller bites, and changing things through, especially if people are doing individual and team in quite different events. If it's if it's team patterns and individual patterns, that's very much easier to manage because the requirements are very much the same. If it's team patterns and special technique, that's a little more difficult. What I found made sense was not to have people jumping at the end of training, nor even necessarily breaking, doing that bit at the start, and if necessary, taking the whole class except the jumpers, and so the jumpers go away and do their bit, and then they come back if they joined in with other disciplines. But the fitness bit, I had a friend, we opened a club years ago. Gosh, when was that? Maybe 17 years ago, if I remember. No, 15 years ago. And she didn't want to do warm-up. She wanted warm-ups in the class, but she didn't want a hard workout in class. She was like, no, people should get fit and then they should come to training, and then because we've got a lot of stuff to teach. And I disagreed for years, but now I'm actually swinging back around to her point of view. There is a lot to cover, even if you're doing only special technique with 5 jumps, or unluckily for the females at the moment 3. We're working on it. It'll change. There's a lot of work to do, and you gotta trust your athletes to be doing their fitness requirements outside. I think our main focus is the craft of the Taekwondo side. It's our main focus shouldn't be on getting the people fit, because they can do that in the gym. They can go and see a fitness professional and get that sort of stuff done. It's good to test your people and make sure that they're within the region where they need to be in terms of agility and speed and flexibility and raw power and things. But I've started swinging around to the other point of view now, learning over the years that if you feel you guys are fit and strong, unless you've got a really good reason to just make sure they're mentally tough by giving them endless push-ups or whatever, I would my latest feeling is sort of a fun warm-up, starting gentle, maybe some games and things, just to really make a loose feeling in the room, and then focus more on the Taekwondo stuff. Maybe a bit of a workout if you notice some gaps, but I'd leave the fitness to the outside, because we've got a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah, we have so much to cover. Yeah, and like I said that recently in a video that we posted, that like we're not fitness instructors, and we have so much to cover that in such little time. That's a very difficult job in itself already. So it's very difficult to get the balance and to manage all that, like what we talked about before, Adrian, of kind of almost being a jack of all trades. It's hard to get that balance for sure.
Yeah. And even with the fitness side of things, or all of the ancillary bits that support what we do as sports coaches, or even as martial arts coaches, it's that element of, even if you're not controlling it, you still need to understand it to some degree. And then the only difference between a person, in my mind, really, between the type of coaching you might do if the person is a competitor or a high performance focused or minded athlete, versus someone who is there for their progression on the martial arts journey, is the time. It's the time scale. It's like, well, okay, if you just want to progress over your lifespan, get better at this, we've got time. We can focus on any detail you want today, tomorrow, the next day. It doesn't really matter what the detail is, as long as you're getting better at something all the time. Right. But once you come to an athlete, now it matters. Now there's a deadline, and now there's what's the most important thing we can improve between now and then in order to get you the maximum improvement in the possible result or outcome. And then it's all about prioritization, time, effort, what to put where. And I think that's where this gets interesting. And I think that's where in New Zealand, well, certainly in Ireland, and from our conversations, even it's happening in other countries as well, athletes are making that decision and they're deciding, okay, the level of competition has gone to the point where if I try to, to spread myself over too many disciplines, I become a jack of all trades and a master of none, and I don't get to compete at that top level with the people who are out there. So, yeah, what would you say is the attractor for people to jump into it? Like, I would have to say for Ireland, it's anything but sparring. Like, we're looking for attractors. How do we, like, we occasionally find someone who really does have an interest in specializing and focusing in pattern. We've had a couple of girls who've been willing to put considerable time into special technique. And, and beyond that, I think we've struggled to link the discipline to the people who should really be attracted to the discipline.
Maybe it's a culture thing, is it?
It might be the culture, yeah. I mean, it's a cliche, right? The Fighting Irish. It's you kind of, it's. But I'm a firm believer that you create a culture. I was working as a school teacher a few years ago at a school of about 1,000 students, and it was interesting seeing the year 7s and the year 9s came into the school, and they were influencing the school culture instead of the other way around. So there's 1,000 people already on the campus. They should have been ones setting the tone and the expectations and sharing the ethos of how things are done in this place with the new people. So I do think culture is adjustable. I think you can just adjust it over time. I remember being in one team that was very cliquey years and years ago. It was actually unpleasant to be on that team. I felt my learning was really held back because I couldn't just go and talk to people and say, hey, you've been doing this a while, how do you do this thing? And what's your opinion on that? And it felt really unfriendly. So that's something I worked hard to change in a few different entities I've been part of. You get a second shot. That's why you have a second discipline. You get a second shot. And if it's special and power, the amount of time you have to put in is vastly less than if you're wanting a second shot by going for team sparring or team patterns, or individual patterns in sparring. So I think it went too far the other way. In Germany last year, I was entered in team special, team power, individual patterns, and individual sparring. And you're quite right there, Mr. Brendan. Too many focuses make you a master of them, and so I guess I fell down there. So I can personally speak to that for the viewers. Tried it. You don't need to do it for yourself. I've gone and done the research for you. It's not that great. Part of the reason was I was also preparing to do to sit for 6 down, but then I ended up getting injured. So that was part of the reason for spreading myself in different events. But if you got one or two, you'll find that they complement each other. So let's say it's special technique and high level patterns. If you're doing both of those, they'll complement each other because they're different. They let you have a mental break but keep progressing. So you can grab a little bit. Okay, so my posture's a bit better in patterns at the moment. I'm not jumping as high as I want on that side kick, but I'm liking my postural sort of effect in my patterns. So they can complement each other. You can code switch, so to speak, from discipline to discipline, and you get another shot. Like a lot of us, we finished the tournament. It might be a 2-day tournament or a 5-day tournament. A lot of us have finished on day 1, 2, or 3. And you may not have got what you wanted, because this is the reality of it. Only one person is going to be on that top step on the podium, but you get to have another go, and you might be more motivated for the second one if you're doing team sparring, team special, team power towards the end of a world champs or something like that. So I do recommend it. Also, you don't actually know what you're good at. We're not that good at figuring that out. So the idea of progression is it's really, really important. It's important in life, and it's important when no matter what you learn, you want to be really generalist at the beginning. You want to play and have fun and experience the joy with all sorts of different things at the beginning. Every different kind of jump you can do, just play with a whole lot. And then after a while, once you decide that you're going to do it, or someone's tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, you should do this, you got some hops, man. Then you focus it a wee bit, you go to the gym, you get more and more and more specific, as you said earlier, towards the there's a deadline and you get more specific. But at the start, I do advocate people try all the different bits of the competitive side, or even the broader art. You don't actually know what you're good at until you've given it a fair test. And I'll give an example from my own experience. Master Mark Hutton, hi sir, came out to New Zealand to help us very, very kindly, as a bunch of coaches have over the years, in the campaign to Benidorm, Spain, and he noticed that the New Zealand team in general were really not that flexible, and he couldn't understand this. He's like, there's 3 points there if you want it. You just have to be able to put your foot up. Why would you sacrifice this when you could just do a wee stretch? So we went away and stretched, and I got too excited, and I tore something in my left hamstring right up the top. So I couldn't do my power side kick with my right foot. Turns out I'm not actually right-footed for the power side kick, and I would never have learned this. I took a fair injury. I decided to switch legs instead of stopping, and it turns out that the left leg is the gold medal leg, and I would never have known. So we actually don't know what we're good at. I'm also a left-legged jumper, so yes. The mid-air kick has got to be a left-legged takeoff, and the high kick as well, and the turning kick to a lesser extent. But I'm right-footed. So at first glance, you might think, okay, I'm right-footed. I want to hit it with my right foot. But if it's a scissor, then you want to take off on your best jump leg, which may not be the one that you think it is. So I really do advocate that people try a bunch of stuff, that a coach benevolently manipulates his squad or her squad into, okay, today, guys, I know we're all here for sparring, but we're all going to jump over this thing first. And hey, you're really good at that. Good, you should explore that. Just plant the seeds. Because we don't actually know what we're good at till we've given things a fair test, and might turn out that we're actually a sparring person and not a patterns person, or what have you. So, yeah.
Certainly experienced that myself down the years. I mean, I'm always saying to people, people will pigeonhole you into something at the end. I mean, like I always find it quite amusing that for a lot of people, like I'd be considered a patterns person, because at the end of my career, I took most medals in team pattern. And I suppose that's a fair comparison, because I didn't win all that much in individual sparring, or team sparring for that matter. But from a coaching point of view, I've almost no patterns medalists. Almost all of the people who've won medals at international championships are sparring. But when people would ask, well, what was your favorite discipline? It was like, well, it depends on the year. I liked what I was winning at, so whatever I was feeling good at the time. So, my first couple of tournaments, I won sparring. I liked sparring. The next couple of tournaments, I didn't win sparring. And so I liked patterns. And, it evolved like that. And, when it came to moving on to the national team, it was like, well, you can't have just one discipline. And that was when we had the 6-person teams. So I did special technique and power. So mainly I was there to be the 6th person on the team and to do the team pattern. But that meant I had to be able to hit one of the special technique at least, and ideally one that wasn't too common to, so there's always the one that most people can get, which is now the flying high side kick is the one that most teams can hit. But at the time it's like, well, okay, but if you can hit the turning kick, or if you can hit, back then the flying side kick was quite a challenge actually. So if you could hit those, it's like, yeah, okay, here we go. And for most of the time when it was doing the power, it was the forward side kick, because if you break that, well, that's brilliant, that's 12 points, away we go. So at one point in time I was breaking that front leg without a step in, and it was like, oh, okay, turns out the boards were definitely not competition standard. But we found that out the hard way. So yeah, right now 3 competition standard PNP plastic brand new out of the box boards, they're not going. That is not something I can do anymore to any consistent degree. So but that's a training thing. So that was one of the ones I wanted to jump onto. So 2 quick ones. So the first is the materials for training and what you would tend to use in club for training for power breaking. And the second one was to pull you back to your comment on the techniques for females, and why we have this unusual situation where in all of our other disciplines, the male and female version is exactly the same. Match durations, rules, times, everything, with the exception of special technique and power breaking, and they're different for who knows. So I know you've got thoughts on them because we've spent years at ringside talking about your thoughts on them. So
Yes,
do you want to share?
Let's start with that 5 for females thing. Just do it. Just do it. That's it. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I think the initial reason that came to be was because the art started 80 years ago, I guess, and things then were very, very traditional. Most countries around the world would have had really distinct gender roles for who was going to work and who was feeding the family and the things that were acceptable to do. And the times have changed, and the art does change. The general took karate and broke it into pieces and made a mosaic, which he recrafted a bunch of times along the way. So I think we can't get too bogged down in tradition because we're not traditional. We don't have a tradition. If you look at the art every 20 years, it's kind of a different art. So I think we should look to that if we're worried about tradition. Also, women can do everything. There are women who weight for weight can outjump me, who can break more than me. I think of Sabum Kara Timmer.
Timmer from Australia, yeah.
She was a junior in, I think, 2009. Don't quote me. I can hardly remember what I've done. But in her prime, she was breaking 3 competition boards at about 53 kilograms in weight.
I can confirm that at less than 50 kilos in weight, she broke 3 boards in 2004 in Riccione. Because I saw that, because I can tell you that because I was coaching the girl who took silver. And
so it's stuck in your mind.
I was watching it. Now our girl broke the 3 board, but she was 80 odd kilo, and it came down to, I think, a tie break, and we bounced off the 2 board knife hand, and she broke it at about 45, 48 kilo. So
I think Richie, you said earlier that the perception of power breaking is that it's the big guys who will win, and that's not always the case. When I won in Spain, I was the smaller. There was Michael Anderson from Sweden, in electrician, I think. He was about that tall and like as wide as you could want to be. It must suck to fly in planes for him. And then Henry from Paraguay, who just was in the team, and I think they got the Middleton team last year in Ireland. He was the next man, and I was very much the smaller, although I'm 100 kilograms around about. I'm not going to tell you exactly. Depends how long I've been in lockdown. So it's not necessarily the size of the person. It's the technique, and women can break. In our grading syllabus here in New Zealand, women have been able to do all of those, actually required, if they want to be a first dan, until about 10 years ago. They had to use the 4 fist to do a tile punch, a downward punch. A lesser number of boards, of course, or tiles rather, but they broke tiles with their 4 fist if they wanted to be a first dan. So they'd already done it.
Okay.
And you have to break a power reverse turning kick no matter what your gender is. If you want to be a third dan, you have to do a mid-air kick, at least in the air when you're a red belt, sort of thing. So it's already within the system, and people can absolutely do it. And I held a demonstration event against a wee bit of resistance from some of our seniors, I guess, whose job it is to look after us and make sure we're not doing anything too stupid, and that we stick fairly close to the tradition that we do and don't have. A padded board. Who wants to have a go? And it was the most popular event in the whole tournament, bar none. Even team sparring took a second seat to ladies stepping up, wearing umpires' uniforms and tracksuits and dobboks and civvies, and just punching a single board with a pad over the front and doing the same with a reverse turning kick with a shoe on, which demonstrates the power. Of course, they can do it, and then all they need to do is go away and condition a bit, and yeah, it's time. It's time, and I believe that's coming. I think the umpire committee are quite happy to introduce that once we're allowed to make some rule changes in the next few years. I want to make a point though. it came up a little earlier in our conversation here, about focusing on things that people don't. Obviously, you can teach me for years about that in the sparring context. There's a few tricks and patterns that people just don't do. For example, like twisting the forearm at the end, especially if you're a bigger or a lankier player. It gives just that little snap of the wrist makes you look like you're more powerful and crisp. There's bits and pieces that people don't do. Mid-air kick, nobody does it. For whatever reason, I've figured it out in my head on a good day, and I can do it. When we had 5 events for the women in a national tournament, I think it was 2 years ago, one female in the tournament got it. So what should a lady focus on the most? The mid-air kick, right? Yeah, you put the work in there and nobody else will get it. Everyone can get the high kick and the side kick. So you'd focus on that. And actually the men were the same. 11 males out of 110 in the tournament got the mid-air kick. So do focus where other people aren't. We know this from the art of war, right? So yeah, I think it's time. Ladies, get out there and break boards. You can do it. You're not built too differently to anyone out there. You can do it. And I forgot.
Especially,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say I've forgotten what the first question was that Mr. Brendan had. So, but
I'll bring you back to that in a while. We'll let Richie jump in there.
Yeah, I was just going to say like that, and that shows the importance of technique, because one of the countries that have really impressed me recently with special and power breaking is Romania, and they don't really necessarily have really big physical imposing guys or anything like that, and I think it goes to show the technique. And when you mentioned Luke Thompson earlier, I remember in the 2007 World Championships in Canada, he was one of those guys who kind of had a little bit of a different style, especially in the side kick. He kind of like almost did like a side lunge coming into it and things like that. And that's just a little bit of creativity. I think is cool as well, because a lot of people think it's very black and white, but it's cool to see like people getting creative with it and bringing their own little flair to these events as well.
You have to be careful though, because our umpires are expecting to see certain things, and when you present them something that's a little too different, you might get disqualified. I got disallowed a break. Apparently, I did a forward stepping front leg back kick in Jesolo, so I got disqualified for my side kick, which I then did again in team events and got away with. So yeah, that is actually, you're quite right. That it's one of the great things. You can really innovate patterns. There are a few things, but it's very much the DNA. You don't want to change the DNA too much. You have to sort of keep that and then take the bits out and play with them. But in special technique and in power test, you really can innovate. You can play. It may not be competition legal, but it doesn't mean you won't find clever little principles that you can apply to other bits of the break-in or the art there. Leaning in on the side kick, that's something everyone can do, no matter what your style. If you were really wanting to hit a bag or a person or a board, as you say, lunging forward and really stretching out that supporting leg, that's something everyone can do. It's and you can apply that. If you're in the dying seconds and you need your opponent to get one warning, and you actually have to put them out of the ring, lean on them, really stretch it out. We know this, but yeah, it's great to take different angles there. Innovation. It comes back to your point again about joy. You can really have some fun trying something and playing with new ways to do things.
Yeah, we'd speaking of the innovation, like from the special technique point of view and looking at the flying high side kick, we had at the International Coaches Conference last summer, Professor Drew Harrison, a biomechanist and athletics coach, but he was looking at the evolution of the high jump in athletics and the various styles that have evolved and been successful throughout the years as dictated by things like the equipment, the small adaptations and changes in the rules of the sport, and the physical preparation required to achieve particular ones. And what's really interesting is that when you look at them, it's like, oh, well, that one's actually a lot like what we do. And that one's a lot like, well, if that works for athletics and in a high jump, a hurdle jump or a straddle jump, it's like, well, that could work for us as well. And as you said, it's the experimentation. It's like, the fact that almost everybody high jumps now with a Fosbury flop. Biomechanically, there are other options. They are just harder for most people. But if you
Right.
happen to be flexible in a particular way, or if you happen to have a limb lengths that happen to be conducive to it, there are other techniques, and it leads to those kind of interesting videos you see. I think I've seen it from a Kenyan high school doing a high jump, and they do almost like a split kick, as a hurdle jump, and they're clearing, 6 foot with a split kick. It's what it looks like, and you're going, well, that's impressive. That looks good. And what it is, it's actually an athletics technique from back in the 60s that was used by the Russians. That was, it was a thing before the technology of the mat developed to where it was safe to land on it.
Right.
So, it's kind of interesting, all of these little things can develop, but there's plenty of room. And even right now, I mean, there was for me, the most interesting one style-wise was European Championships in Skövde in Sweden in 2013. And there was a number of styles used for the flying turning kick and reverse turning kick, between step-ins, stationary jumps, almost like 360s. One guy did his reverse turning kick with a run-up, which is brave. So run up, swing the non-kicking leg, kick with the takeoff leg, which is brave.
I get about 40 centimeters higher with that, with what you've just described there, the 360, but it's not within the rules. Sometimes I think we want Taekwondo ITF to look as good as possible, don't we just liberalize the rules to who can hit the highest? Like, do you have to take off on 2 feet? Who cares? Let's just see what a person can do.
And the thing is, at the time, I think with the writing of the rules, you could have done, for example, in power breaking, the side piercing kick could have been a turning side piercing kick. There was, the rules hadn't been tightened. So it was at the time when they've gotten rid of the step jumps, like, they'd kind of gotten rid of all of the finicky bits about how you got there and simplify the preparation, but they hadn't quite gotten around to some of the issues that were to come later, like when Peter from England, one of the English guys anyway, in 2014, he was judged that his foreboard punch was illegal because it was a turning punch. It's like, that guy just put his knuckles through 4 boards.
He just broke 4 boards. Yeah. I'm really not a fan of that nitty gritty kind of umpiring, and I know a lot of our chief umpires in different countries and also in the ITF. I know a lot of them are just really more interested in did she break the board kind of a thing, or did he jump and kick the thing. I know that there is a tension between. Sometimes I suspect, and nobody's admitted to it, but I suspect sometimes some of our umpires are expecting power breakers to do apologetics for the theories and the concepts. They're expecting, a Dorsan reverse punch to be the be all and end all, and they want power breakers to prove it. They don't want to see a nice high torque kind of a swinging punch, which we've also got in right. They don't want to see that. They want to see Taekwondo work as they conceive of it. But as I said earlier, the art is always evolving. It's and it will, and it should. It's good to explore. Those Romanians, though, they're very sharp. In 2013, they came about 20th best country, and then 2 years later they were second, I believe, in years ago. And what I think they did was they switched to the events that we're talking about today. I think they had a team of about the same, and I think they got about the same number of medals. They just shifted them to the end that we all want. They got more goals, and they did it by switching to power and special, and they looked at the science that's already out there. The plyometrics, as you say, the athletics people, basketballers, they've been jumping for a century. We can learn from these people. There's no need for us to struggle away in a dojo and trying to figure it out ourselves. When we can look up the high jumpers, the long jumpers, the basketballers, and people who do things that are similar, that we can slightly recraft to make an advantage, and hope that nobody else has spotted it too.
I guess if there was any practical takeaways that we were to take for anybody that might be listening who's really interested in power breaking or special technique, you mentioned earlier simple things like lunging and leaning into boards maybe, and things like that. Are there any kind of tips or advice you give to people who are looking to kind of get a little bit more serious in these events?
Sure. The first one, we know that speed is the king. The faster you can go, the better. We know that. That's talked about a lot in Taekwondo. Mass is the second one. Something that's not talked so explicitly in theory of power. It shows up a wee bit in the training secrets. I think it's number 3, the angle and distance. Those are critical. Those are absolutely critical. We're told this in patterns, but we don't understand because there's nobody there. We get it in sparring because they hit us first, or second, third, fourth, and fifth, as the case may be. Probably up to 10 in my case. The angle makes such a difference. Now here's a trick. So you got your phone and you're filming your let's say it's a power side kick. You're filming your power side kick because you want to review it. Watch the video upside down. Don't watch the video up the right way, because what you'll see is, oh, that guy's doing a side kick or she's doing a knife hand or whatever. Watch the video upside down so you can see the lines. You just want to see the shapes. Geometry is a huge part of all aspects of the art, but especially it's really critical in your jumps and your breaks. The lines that your feet and hands take, and the place that your hips are. These are really critical. And you can look at a video going, yeah, I know what I'm going to see. It's a side kick, because you got that frame of mind. Flip the video upside down. It's a bit strange, and you'll see, oh, okay, so the side kick's actually falling because the video's upside down, which means that when it's up the right way, I'm not seeing that my side kick is rising, and that's why the boards are jumping out of the top of the machine and they're scuffing rather than breaking. Almost all your breaks, you want to be perpendicular into the boards this way, and if you spin, actually I have a board.
Of course you do.
Funnily enough, now these are not so friendly. Here's a tip as well. Round those off. Get somebody's granddad to plane it off in a bench vise. So I'll find some tradie and chuck them a box and get those corners taken off to protect your mats and your feet and stuff. Anyway, so you want to be hitting perpendicular like that. You want to fingertip for demonstration purposes. You want to be hitting perpendicular like that, and if possible, like that as well. It's a bit harder for your circular techniques like knife hand turning in reverse, but ideally you want to be hitting perpendicular from the top view and from the side view. My mathematics is not so strong, and they tell me that it's not quite as simple as I thought it was when I made a video about this on TKD Coaching.com. Hi, Mason Excel. But you want to be hitting dead in. That alone will put you a little bit further down the track. You'll be able to add a half board or be more consistent. Lean in on the side kick, and we've already spoken about it. And everyone can do this in different events, but be successful. Be successful. Don't mess yourself up because you're trying to run a marathon on your first go. Work towards it over the weeks and months, and have a little sawtooth to your progress. So at the end of a session, you're a bit tired. Put up a piddly little, find the oldest board in the club and break it with something that's really unreasonably too easy to do, and make that slow sawtooth over time. There are definitely some very simple principles that can stand anyone in good stead for starting out or making a wee bit of progress. And ask for help. You don't have to struggle away. There's a lot of people out there who can give you some pointers. Send somebody a message, they might reply.
That's wonderful. Absolutely. And, I know yourself under normal circumstances, and maybe these are even normal circumstances for you, given that a lot of the coaching that you do is remote coaching. Certainly we will provide a link, but if you want to tell people where they can find you and find out a little bit more about how to enjoy breaking things.
Will do, absolutely. I'll send you that information, or just if you can just Google my name, and I'm sure it'll show up somewhere, and you'll be able to follow the breadcrumbs to find me.
Perfect. But we'll let you get away and carry on with your day. You have, by the sounds of it, some tradespeople waiting to get started where you are, and I suppose we're due to finish up our day and wind things down over here. Brendan, an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure we'll catch you again very, very soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you both. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for having me with you both here. As I say, I've watched from afar, particularly that fancy footwork, Richie. I've really I've learned a lot. So it's nice to be able to share a tiny bit in return. So thank you very much.
Not at all.
That's what it's all about.
Let's keep it coming.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Good night and good morning.
All right. Sleep well.